The forest seemed to hold its breath as Eleanor, Nell Hayes, and Deputy Marcus Flynn made their way deeper into the pine barrens, their boots sinking softly into the damp undergrowth. The oppressive blanket of night had descended early, swallowing the faint glow of the setting sun and leaving the woods cloaked in darkness. Nell's breath came out in shallow puffs, visible in the cold air. As she adjusted the strap of her backpack and tightened her grip on the flashlight. Beside her, Marcus moved with practiced ease, his worn leather jacket rustling faintly as he navigated the uneven ground. They had reached the site of the latest disappearance, small clearing just beyond a thicket of twisted pines. The local sheriff had reluctantly agreed to let Nell accompany Marcus on the investigation, his skepticism tempered by the mounting evidence that something was amiss. As they stepped into the clearing, Nell's eyes immediately caught the jagged carvings etched into the bark of several trees. The symbols were unlike anything she had seen before. Angular lines intersecting in chaotic patterns, some resembling runes, others more abstract, their meaning obscured by time. "Look at this," Nell whispered, crouching to examine the closest tree. Her fingers traced the rough grooves, and a shiver ran down her spine. "These aren't random, they're deliberate." Marcus squinted, his face weathered and serious. "Never seen markings like this out here. Could be some kind of old ritual, maybe tied to the settlers or native tribes." The air around them grew heavier, the usual chorus of night creatures conspicuously absent. No crickets chirped, no owls hooted, just a suffocating silence that pressed in from all sides. Nell's heart hammered against her ribs as she scanned the tree line, the beam of her flashlight trembling slightly. "Do you hear that?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Marcus shook his head, eyes narrowed. "Nothing, too quiet." "That's the worst kind of quiet." Suddenly, a rustle near the edge of the clearing caught Nell's attention. She swung her light toward the sound, but all she saw were shifting shadows, elongated and flickering as if the forest itself was breathing. She blinked hard, questioning her senses. Was something watching them? "Did you see that?" Nell murmured. "See what?" Marcus replied, tension creeping into his voice. Something moved, just there. They advanced cautiously, each step measured and deliberate. Marcus knelt beside a patch of disturbed earth, brushing away leaves to reveal faint markings etched into the soil lines, forming a circle broken by jagged spikes. The unmistakable sign of a ritual site. "This is no ordinary disappearance," Marcus said grimly. "Whatever's out here, it's been here a long time." Nell swallowed hard, the weight of the discovery settling over her like a dark cloud. The ancient symbols and unnatural silence were pieces of a puzzle far larger and far darker than she had anticipated. As the forest whispered around them, promising secrets and shadows, Nell knew their investigation had crossed a threshold. "We need to find out what these symbols mean," she said, determination hardening her voice, "before more people vanish." Marcus nodded, his usual skepticism replaced by a grim resolve. "Then we better get to work." As they retreated from the clearing, the shadows seemed to close in behind them, the forest alive with unseen eyes. The signs of the old darkness were no longer hidden, they were a warning. And Nell felt, deep in her bones, that the pine barrens were watching, waiting, and ready to strike again. The night stretched on, thick with foreboding, as the two allies prepared to confront the ancient evil stirring beneath the trees. The boundary between myth and reality was dissolving, and the forest's sinister heart beat faster with every step they took. The whispers in the pines had grown louder and there was no turning back now. The town hall was packed beyond capacity, the wooden benches groaning under the weight of anxious bodies. Eleanor Nell Hayes slipped in through the side door, clutching her worn leather journal close to her chest. The air inside was thick with tension, a mixture of sweat, old wood, and the faint scent of pine carried in from outside. The murmurs grew louder as the clock struck 7, and the mayor called the meeting to order. Voices erupted almost immediately. "They're just accidents," a burly man shouted from the front row. "People get lost in the woods all the time. No need to scare ourselves with ghost stories." A sharp retort came from an elderly woman near the back. "Ghost stories don't make me laugh. These woods have been cursed since the settlers came. The Jersey Devil, the old pact sits, all real. You just refuse to see it." Nell felt the weight of every accusing glance, every whispered suspicion. She scanned the crowd, recognizing faces from around town, the store owner, the schoolteacher, hunters, and farmers, all wrapped in their own fears and doubts. Deputy Marcus Flynn stood near the sheriff's podium, his arms crossed, jaw tight as he tried to maintain order. Sheriff Linda Caraway raised her hands for silence. "Everyone, please, let's keep this civil. We're here to talk facts, not legends." But facts were hard to come by. The disappearances had no clear explanation. Search parties returned empty-handed, and no one had seen a trace of the missing. The fear of the unknown gnawed at the edges of reason. Jonas Red, the local hunter, stood suddenly. His voice was low but carried through the hall. "I've seen it. The Jersey Devil, or whatever you want to call it. I was out tracking deer near the old cranberry bogs when I heard this screech like nothing natural. Then I saw it, a shadow with wings and glowing red eyes. It wasn't just a story. It's real, and it's hunting us." Murmurs swept through the crowd like wildfire. Some scoffed, others shuddered. Nell's heart pounded. Every story, every whisper shed gathered so far, pointed to something larger, darker. Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady but edged with frustration. "We need to stay grounded. Fear makes people see monsters where there are none. We're doing everything we can, searches, patrols, safety measures. But spreading panic won't help anyone." The room split further. One side nodded in agreement. The other jeered. The meeting threatened to spiral out of control. From her perch near the back, Nell opened her journal, scribbling quick notes. She felt the isolation deepen. The very people she hoped to help were turning on each other, divided by fear and disbelief. She knew that to find answers, she'd have to navigate these fractured loyalties carefully. When the meeting finally adjourned, the crowd spilled into the chilly night air. Nell lingered near the doorway, watching the groups form and dissolve like shifting shadows. Mabel Crane approached quietly, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "They're scared," she said softly, eyes piercing. "But fear is the forest's oldest weapon. It feeds on division, on mistrust." Nell nodded, feeling the weight of Mabel's words settle over her like a shroud. "How do we stop it?" Mabel's gaze drifted to the dark tree line. "By remembering the old ways and accepting that some darkness can never be fully understood." The forest closed in around them, whispering secrets Nell was only beginning to hear. The town was fracturing, and with it, the fragile hope of uncovering the truth. But she would not turn away, not now. As Nell walked back to her rented cabin, the shadows seemed to reach for her, the whispers growing louder. The divisions in the town were just the beginning. Something ancient was stirring, and the forest's dark heart beat steadily beneath the surface. Her resolve hardened. Whatever it took, she would face the darkness alone if she had to. The night was far from over, and the whispers never truly ceased. The cabin was a sanctuary of shadows and scents, a world apart from the restless forest surrounding it. Nell stepped inside with tentative curiosity, her boots thudding softly on the creaking wooden floorboards. Herbs hung from the rafters in bundles, their faded leaves whispering secrets in the flickering candlelight. The air was thick with the musky perfume of sage, juniper, and something earthier, something slightly sweet and ancient. Mabel Crane sat by the hearth, her silver hair catching the firelight like strands of moonbeam, her piercing eyes fixed on Nell with a weight that seemed to carry centuries. "You're looking for answers," Mabel said, her voice a brittle thread woven with both warmth and warning. "But some truths don't come easily, and some stories are sung by shadows older than the pines themselves." Nell nodded, settling into the worn armchair opposite Mabel. The room's dimness seemed to close in, pressing against her skin like the forest's own breath. She pulled her journal from her bag and opened it, the pages crisp and filled with hastily scrawled notes and sketches. The disappearances, the Jersey Devilets, more than just legend, isn't it? Mabel's gaze hardened, the flicker of flames casting shifting patterns on her lined face. The Jersey Devil is a mask, a tale to frighten children and keep wanderers wary. But beneath the bark and the soil, something older stirs. She reached beneath the table and produced a small, leather-bound book, its cover cracked and worn by time. Long ago, before the settlers and the roads, before even the legends took root, the people who lived here made a pact, not with gods or spirits, but with the forest itself, or the force that dwells within it. Nell leaned forward, her pulse quickening. A pact? What kind of pact? Mabel opened the tome carefully, revealing pages etched with cryptic symbols, drawings of twisted trees and shadowy figures with burning eyes. "This was to bind the primordial shade," she said. "An ancient evil older than any story told around a campfire. They sealed it beneath the pines, using rites lost to time." The weight of those words settled in Nell's chest like a stone. She traced the symbols with a finger, feeling their cold, mysterious energy seep through the paper. "And it's waking up again." Mabel's eyes darkened. The forest feels the stirrings. The shadows lengthen. The animals grow restless. The pact weakens as people forget, and the land is disturbed. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, a chorus of whispers that seemed to echo the warning in Mabel's voice. Nell's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the mystery with this new, chilling context. The disappearances were not random. The Jersey Devil, not the true threat it, was the forest's ancient heart, and its hunger was awakening. "What can we do?" Nell asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mabel closed the book and placed it gently on the table. She reached up to her neck and pulled out a worn amulet, its surface scratched and dull but undeniably potent. "This," she said, "is a fragment of the Pact's power. It's a link to the old rites, a reminder that the darkness can be held at bay. But it takes more than talismans and stories. It takes belief, courage, and sacrifice." Nell held the amulet in her hand, feeling its cold weight sink into her skin. The forest outside seemed to lean closer, its shadows pressing against the windowpane like fingers hungry to reach inside. The line between myth and reality blurred, and Nell understood that her journey was no longer one of mere investigation. She was now a part of a story much larger, older, and far more terrifying than she had ever imagined. As the night deepened, the whispers in the pine barrens grew louder, carrying echoes of a pact forged in fear, bound by hope, and threatened by a darkness that refused to be forgotten. And somewhere beneath the ancient trees, the primordial shade waited. The sun hung low over the pine barrens, its amber rays filtering through the dense canopy in dying slants of light that seemed reluctant to leave the world beneath. Eleanor Nell Hayes tightened the straps on her backpack and consulted the faded map once more, her breath misting in the cool, early evening air. She had been told to find Jonas Reed's cabin by the old logging road that twisted like a serpent through the woods. The journey to this meeting was more than just a bullet point on her list. It was a step into the heart of the forest's secrets. Jonas Reed was a name that came up often in hushed conversations around the town's diner and the sheriff's office. A hunter and woodsman who had lived most of his life in the shadow of the pines. He was known for his gruff demeanor and uncanny knowledge of the land. But more than that, he was one of the few locals willing to speak openly about the Jersey Devil sightings, though his accounts went far beyond the usual folklore. Nell's boots crunched on the carpet of pine needles and brittle leaves as she followed the narrow trail. The forest around her was alive with the sounds of chirping crickets and the occasional call of a distant owl. Yet beneath the natural chorus, there was an undercurrent, subtle, almost imperceptible tension that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. After nearly an hour, the trees thinned, revealing a small clearing with a weathered cabin nestled among towering pines. Smoke curled lazily from a crooked chimney, and the faint scent of burning wood mingled with the earthy forest aroma. Nell approached cautiously, her journal clutched tightly in her hand. The door creaked open before she could knock. Jonas Reed stood framed against the dim light inside, his rugged face shadowed by the brim of a battered hat. His eyes, sharp and wary, studied her for a long moment. "You're the journalist, right? Eleanor Hayes." His voice was gravelly, shaped by years of outdoor life and quiet solitude. "That's me," Nell replied, forcing a polite smile. "I'm here about the disappearances and the Jersey Devil stories." He grunted and stepped aside. "Come in, then. It's not often I get visitors who don't run off after a day." The cabin's interior was sparse but cozy. A worn wooden table held an assortment of maps, hunting gear, and a half-empty thermos. Nell took a seat, pulling out her notebook. "So," she began, "you say you saw the Jersey Devil. What exactly did you see?" Jonas leaned back, eyes narrowing as if peering into a memory he'd rather forget. "It wasn't like any creature I've ever seen. Not just some myth or animal. This thing was bigger, darker. It moved wrong, like it wasn't bound by normal rules." He described a late summer evening when he was tracking deer near a river bend. The air had been heavy and still, the kind that presses against your skin and makes the hairs on your neck stand up. Then he saw it, a hulking shadow slipping between the trees. Its eyes burned like coals, piercing the dusk with an unholy glow. "It didn't run or walk," Jonas said, voice dropping to a whisper. "It glided, almost shifting, like the forest was a part of it, and it was part of the forest." Nell scribbled furiously, her pulse quickening. The image was far removed from the half-remembered tales of a winged beast or a devilish prankster. This was something primal, ancient. "Did it say anything? Make noise?" she asked. Jonas shook his head. No sound, just silence, like the world held its breath. Then it was gone, leaving nothing but a cold spot in the air. The room seemed to grow colder as the story unfolded, and Nell felt a shiver creep down her spine. She glanced toward the window, where the last light of day was fading fast. Outside, the forest pressed close, dark and unknowable. "You think it's the Jersey Devil, or something else?" Nell probed. Jonas's gaze darkened. "The Jersey Devil's just a face we put on the fear. But whatever's out there, it's older than the stories, older than the pines themselves." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden rustling outside. Nell's heart leaped as shadows flickered beyond the cabin's thin walls. Jonas grabbed a flashlight and stepped to the door, peering into the encroaching darkness. "Probably just a deer," he muttered, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his skepticism. Nell followed, the beam of light cutting through the gloom. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, something quick, darting just beyond the reach of the glow. Her breath caught. "This forest, it's alive," she whispered, more to herself than to Jonas, like it's watching. He nodded grimly, "And it doesn't like visitors." Back inside, Jonas pulled out an old leather-bound book filled with sketches and notes, his personal ledger of sightings and local lore. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but the images were vivid: shadowy figures, strange symbols carved into bark, and cryptic warnings scrawled in margins. Nell pored over the pages, her skepticism giving way to a creeping dread. The stories weren't just folklore. They were warnings encoded in generations of fear. As night settled outside, Jonas lit a small fire in the hearth. The flames cast flickering shadows that danced across the cabin walls, lending an eerie life to the hunters' tales. "You've got to understand," Jonas said, his voice low. "The Jersey Devils, just the mask. The real terror. It's something buried deep, something that's waking up." Nell felt the weight of his words settle over her like a shroud. The forest's whispers grew louder in her mind, weaving a tapestry of shadows and secrets that refused to be ignored. Hours later, as she lay on a cot in the cabin, sleep eluded her. The stories, the shadows, the cold eyes of that dark presence haunted her thoughts. Outside, the wind stirred the pines, carrying whispers that promised the forest's mysteries were far from solved. Tomorrow, she knew, would take her deeper into the heart of the Pines and closer to the darkness that waited patiently beneath the trees. The sun dipped low behind the ragged horizon, painting the sky with bruised shades of purple and orange as Eleanor Nell Hayes tightened the laces on her boots and adjusted the strap of her backpack. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth, the forest breathing around her with a slow, deliberate pulse. She had waited for this moment, the twilight hour when the pine barrens shifted from merely eerie to something palpably alive with menace. Her boots crunched softly on the carpet of fallen leaves as she stepped beneath the spreading canopy, the world dimming rapidly. Shadows coiled like serpents between the trunks, twisting and reaching with silent spectral fingers. Nell's breath came in shallow bursts, her senses sharpening with each step. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It was an active participant in the unfolding mystery. A sudden rustle to her right made her freeze. Her eyes scanned the gloom, catching only the swaying branches and a scattering of crows taking wing. "Just animals," she whispered to herself, though the tight knot of fear in her stomach refused to loosen. The dusk deepened, and the shadows grew longer, pooling at her feet like spilled ink. Nell's journal hung from her neck, the leather cover worn and familiar. She fingered its edges as she walked, her mind racing with fragments of Tommy's last entry's obsessions with the Jersey Devil. Strange lights flickering in the forest depths, whispers that no one else seemed to hear. Tonight, she hoped to find answers, or at least clues to the growing darkness. A twig snapped sharply behind her, a crack that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet. She spun, heart hammering, but saw nothing. The forest had fallen eerily silent once more, as if holding its breath. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Nell strained to catch the words, but they dissolved into the rustling leaves. Pushing forward, she reached a small clearing bathed in the last fading light. Here, the trees stood like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches etched against the darkening sky. Nell's gaze caught movement of shadow slipping between two pines, darker than the growing night itself. Her breath caught in her throat. The figure seemed to flicker, its form shifting and intangible, eyes glowing faintly like burning coals. "No," she murmured, blinking rapidly. "It can't be." The shadow vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the whisper of leaves and a cold, lingering dread. Nell's hands trembled as she clutched her journal tighter. Was this the Jersey Devil? Or something older, more terrible, the primordial shade that Mabel had hinted at? As night fully embraced the forest, Nell made camp beneath a cluster of ancient pines. The fire she built sputtered weakly, the smoke curling into the dark sky like ghostly fingers. Sleep, when it came, was restless and fragmented. Vivid nightmares tore through her mind, visions of the forest alive, shadows writhing and whispering, shapes emerging from the darkness to claim her. She dreamed of Tommy, lost and calling out from beneath twisted roots, his eyes wide with terror. The primordial shade loomed, a shifting mass of darkness and flame, feeding on fear and despair. Nell awoke with a start, sweat slick on her skin, the fire reduced to glowing embers. Outside the fragile circle of light, the forest pulsed with an unearthly rhythm, as if breathing in tandem with her own ragged breaths. The whispers returned, soft and insistent, threading through the night air with promises and threats indistinguishable. Nell knew the forest was watching, waiting, and so was she. Her resolve hardened. The truth was no longer a distant theory, but a terrifying reality she had to face. The shadows and the pines were not figments of fear. They were something far more sinister, something that had been waiting for her all along. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the world in pale gold, Nell packed her journal and extinguished the fire. The forest seemed to exhale, releasing its hold on the night, but the dread lingered. A silent promise that the darkness was far from over. She glanced back once, catching a glimpse of movement among the treesies, like burning coals watching her departure. The whispers followed her steps, fading but never truly gone. The nightfall in the pines was a crossing point, one that would change everything. And Nell was no longer certain she would ever leave the forest unchanged.